some of you don't know Cal's background, some of you do, and I thought we'd start with that. So why don't you tell everybody what you did prior to real estate? You don't have to go all the way back before Tyler.
Right. Well, yeah, no, I was doing what I'm doing. Actually, I wasn't. Post-Tyler. I was a minister for 22 years in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and here in Lancaster County. I was at 11 years at 2 different congregations. Most of you are not old enough to know Paul Hurst from Kingsway sold me the house that we live in today when we moved. He was a member of the congregation I pastored. And then his son Chad helped me buy my first investment. It was actually my second investment property. And so my foray into real estate was investing. And then after 11 years at my congregation in Lancaster, I wanted to do something different. I was not impassioned with moving to another congregation. And so I had this belief that if you had a pulse and you woke up in the morning, you could sell real estate. It's easy as pie. They make all this money.
So when were you licensed?
In 2007.
Okay, 2007. Where did you take your classes?
At Elkhart with you, Matt, and then Andy Tompos taught the second series, first or second. You did either the first or second.
So what was your big why back then?
That was a good question. I had to reflect on that. Probably my big why was to just make more money than I made as a pastor, and which even now as I reflect back, that's more than what the average real estate agent makes. So I think I made somewhere between $50,000 and $55,000 as a salaried pastor.
It sounds like you loved it here also.
What's that?
It kept you home, it kept you here.
Yeah, we grew to, and kind of from a psychological standpoint, our youngest daughter went to college that year. So there was a lot of freeing of, I shouldn't say total freeing of familial responsibilities, but I didn't have the same tie downs that some of you may find yourself with kids in school and that kind of thing.
So where did you start your real estate career?
Here, yeah, Keller Williams 3 companies ago.
So you only ever been a Keller Williams agent?
That is correct. And my earliest memory was walking into the door at Airport Road, and Tim started explaining sponsorship, and Justin in the hallway where he had his desk said, "I'll be his sponsor." So Justin is my sponsor.
Some things never change. You're right place at the right time. Everything just works out. So tell us about your systems when you first started in the real estate.
They were fairly non-existent. It took me actually a couple of years to adopt a CRM system. And actually it probably took me 4 or 5 years to do that. I thought I could do it from an Excel spreadsheet. And the amount of people wasn't that great. So yeah, they were pretty non-existent.
Non-existent. So you said you made $55,000? Or that's what you made as a minister. Did you do that your first year in real estate?
It actually took me, I think it took me, I looked back, I got my license in 07, started full-time in 08.
Okay.
It actually took me probably until 13 that I made more money. It took me 5 years.
Okay. So let's talk about, let's get past that first year, because we really weren't doing any systems.
Right.
You had an Excel spreadsheet. You knew you had a client database. So how did you do your first deal? There it is. How did you do your, I didn't have that one on there either. So who and what was your first deal? everybody knows their first deal, right?
No.
Everybody remembers?
My first couple of deals, I have to look. The first deal,
Actually, you can lie to us a little bit too, we know you were
I
fast.
bought a house at auction, overestimated what I could get for it, and fixed that property. I got into the business to flip houses, so I bought that house, fixed it up, resold it right before the market crashed, and I made my commission, basically is what happened on that first deal.
So then part of the system when you first got in was you weren't even thinking of sales as much as you were thinking of buying houses, flipping houses, and making money from that.
Correct.
There really wasn't, had you read the book? I'm sorry, Tommy, that's not on. Had you read the book?
Which, MREA? No, I didn't read that till.
We knew that.
5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Okay,
Did you
so,
say 5 years ago, Cal?
Yeah.
What about the investor? Have you read Millionaire Real Estate Investor?
I probably read that a couple years earlier, actually. Yes, I have.
so then systems were somewhat non-existent from a sales end, whatever happened. Investment end, in fact, I remember you were doing some with Julie Nelson's father back then.
Correct.
I'm name dropping again, so sorry.
No,
Ask me
Uncle
later.
Lee.
Ask me later. And she was in your downline too, right?
That's Justin's cousin.
I know.
The systems, the systems were to comb the MLS every morning to see what came on the market, check it at noon and in the afternoon, go look at properties and see which ones I wanted to write an offer on. So the first year, I'd have to go back and analyze this, but in 2008 I did 13 deals. My guess is about 25% of them were my own deals.
Okay. So what happened in 2008?
Well, 2008, at the time in Lancaster, I remember having this sick feeling in my stomach. You mentioned somewhere that there's some inklings that we're going to go through a rough market. And at the time, it was like, okay, well, what's a rough market? And so 2008, things were starting to change. However, nobody really recognized it, I don't think, until, well, 2009 is when the stock market bottom fell out, and yeah, just a lot of financial uncertainty.
So did you have any systems then? Still systemless,
Yeah,
other than the flips, and
correct.
now you could get a flip but you couldn't sell it.
Right, I have a portfolio now, and I'd have to look back at it. 3 or 4 of them were bought intentionally to flip, and I wasn't able to, and I kept those as long-term investments, so they're still part of my investment portfolio.
So it's all about staying power.
Correct.
That worked.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2008, 2009, I don't know if you know how many deals you did in 2009.
Well, I can tell you when I think systems became much more prevalent.
What year did it change that you got a little bit more,
Systems
you weren't
oriented,
purposeful yet, but you got a little bit more detailed?
when KW ruled out EH.
And what year was that, do you remember?
I would not even be able to tell you when that was.
Justin?
Probably 10, 11, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Oh, let's pretend that it's 10, because who knows, right?
Well,
We'll just pretend it's
Yeah, it
10.
probably was. I think it was
I can look at my numbers here. So I did 13 deals in 8, 21 deals in 9, 19 deals in 10,
And E-Edge was a big help. You see that?
11 deals in 16, and 19 deals in 12.
Okay.
So things began, I think things started to make a turn in 13 for me.
And what changed in 2013 then?
I don't know if it was the product of the environment. I hired, my wife came to work for me, and I think that was in 13. Was that I made my first hire in 13 and started to utilize the systems of a CRM. And then
Were
in
you using
14,
Edge CRM?
yeah.
Okay.
I've used that up until this past year or two. I'm now with Verivity.
Right.
So, and then in 14, Tyler came to work for us as transaction coordinator. And
Sounds like you're gaining expense. I hope your income's going up.
I went from 3 million to, and then 13, 14, and 15, I was 6, 7 million
Okay.
those 3 years.
Okay, so let's look at 2013, 14, and 15 where we've, because I would assume that somewhere between 2008 and 2012, volume was about top end 4 million.
Yeah, I think 3.6 would have been the high end.
So now we're doing 6 to 7. What made that movement take place?
Well, yeah, the systems are there. I think, I look back at this, it was actually later in this. I would have said 13 is when things started to change. 15, I took bold. And really, I forget how they say it in bold. Change happens incrementally and then all of a sudden. And so in 15, I took bold for the second time. I signed up for MAPS coaching, and I had staff in place. And so things, 15 maybe is when Tyler actually came in.
Do you remember, Tyler? 15. So it all changed because you brought Tyler in. This is amazing. We're getting really deep now. Going back then to systems, 13, 14, there were some systems. You must have taken, you said you took your second bolt in 2015. When did you take your first bolt?
2010.
Really? Back in 10, so we missed that one. Who was that? Who was your instructor?
The same one as 15.
15, so
Pat
Pat
Mancuso.
Mancuso. Connie's favorite.
He actually is one of my favorites. So for those of you who understand disc profile, Pat is a high D, and I appreciate high Ds. If you're a high I, you're offended by high Ds. And I tell Tim that's why you don't like Tim either.
We've talked about you, Connie. So you had Pat, nothing really happened in 2010, business-wise, though you were acquainted with Bold, but in 2015, is this when you got purposeful or more detailed, or?
Yeah, I would say that's when I truly began the journey that I'm on today. It was, early on was the wide path, now is the narrower, rocky path that I'm walking, that is much more defined.
So share with everyone what kind of growth you went through that.
Well, I think the biggest change, and this is what all of you can look at, is your own mindset. And that's the biggest, there's no magic bullet in this business. It ultimately starts with you. What do you want to do? Defining it, creating a plan, and then working your plan. And those are hard steps. Where do you want to be 10 years from now? And then work backwards as to, here's what I need to do today. There's a joke in my team, in my family, about my goals and then realistically what are our goals. So for those of you who were at the Mastermind, my biggest takeaway was when I jumped up and down when Caleb Connect said, "Stop thinking realistically." So it helps to have people around you who think realistically, who force you to put, I guess, feet to your dreams. It's just that so often we're bound by realistic thinking that we never expand our mindset and our world enough to go bigger. So my 10-year goal is to sell 10,000 units. That's 850 a month, 10 years from now. And I've been too scared to actually work it backwards.
You said again, 10,000 units total
Total,
in a 10-year period of time?
in 1 year.
Oh, in 1 year, okay.
Basically, that'll be 20 sites with a team doing 500 units at each location. Kind of that's how I boiled it down.
Why are you scared to look at it backwards?
Well, I need to probably grow faster at this point than what I'm willing to do. And I've been slow and incremental, and it tends to work well for me. That just means, okay, then I have to have a much more aggressive plan for today than it's kind of it's probably one of my drunk monkeys. I'm afraid to know what it really would take me today to get there. I'm still too comfortable.
Cal, could you explain the 20 sites? Some people might not know what you mean by 20 sites.
20 sites would mean that I'd have a presence in 20 market centers around the world like I do here. I just physically wouldn't be present. I'd own a team that functions out of another market center. And my strategy is going to be to remain more Pennsylvania oriented early on, and then we'll see where it goes from there. There's an awful lot of sites in Pennsylvania that I can go. And I'm not necessarily enamored, because people have asked like why I limit to myself. I'm not looking to go to Philadelphia and Miami, and I'm okay with secondary markets like Lancaster. Because Lancaster's not the most appealing place for expansion, because our model's built on average price point of $250,000. And our average sales price is not $250,000. I would be ecstatic to be averaging $250,000 per unit in Lancaster.
What is your average?
Last year it was 180. I'd have to look to see what it is this year.
Right around 200.
Yes, Tyler, he knows.
So tell us about your typical day right now, since you beat me up today. By 5 minutes or something.
Yeah. Typical day, and today has not been a real good typical day. My appointments have been in the morning. We'd go in and I'd make phone calls. And if I don't have appointments, I make phone calls all day. I'm not efficient in my lead generation like you learn in Bold. You're supposed to get your 20 contacts in 2 hours, and I rarely get 20 contacts in 2 hours. So I'll spend, yesterday I probably spent 4 hours doing lead gen. And so if I could devise my schedule perfectly, it would be to lead gen all morning, do a couple of appointments in the afternoon, and be home by 5.
How many appointments roughly a week are you doing, like on average?
Well, I'm focused on sellers. If I can do 2 a week,
Okay.
then I can be successful.
Okay.
So the goal would be 1 a day, actually, and then 2 a day.
Say that again, I got lost in your number.
2 per week,
Okay.
and it assumes I'll take 1 listing per week. So for this year to meet my goals, if I take 1 listing a week, I'll meet my 100 units for the year. And I have not met that goal. So I looked back here at my numbers 2 weeks ago. We had 51 on the books, sold and pending. 31 were buyers, 20 were sellers. So it'd be better to be 50-50 or 60-40 rather than 40-60.
How many's on your team?
There's 4 of us. One unpaid, or 1 unlicensed assistant.
I believe he means he's the unpaid one, Lori gets all the money.
She takes care of all the money. A transaction
Three
coordinator and who's licensed and a buyer's agent. So within the system, so yeah, the purposeful, at this point, the way I've been operating is a buyer's agent gets a salary plus a small commission. And my goal for the buyer's agent at the beginning of the year was that he would make somewhere between 60,000 to 70,000. With the chance of maybe going more. Once he goes above that, then he might as well be strictly commission, because it's going to be more beneficial to him. I already have built in, so buyer's agent, if they were totally commission oriented, we get 40%. And I'm building in the next hire, which is a showing assistant who will get a monthly or get an hourly pay and 10% bonus on all closed deals. So the buyer side, it's roughly buyer side gets 50% of the, and then the business side keeps 50%, and that's the way to ensure it's win-win for everyone.
Who does your hires?
At this point, I do.
Okay. Is that the model?
Well, when you're big enough, I'll have basically a general manager who will likely be doing that.
I believe that is in the model.
Yeah,
Uh,
not the executive assistant doing hires?
Well, that it could be. If the executive assistant would be doing all the hires
For the admin.
in the admin side. On the sales side, as long as I'm still in the business, it would be me. And then eventually, a lead buyer's agent would be responsible for hiring all buyer's agents.
And showing assistant?
Correct.
Or not present?
Yeah.
Do you make your calls from home, or do you have an off-site office, or do you come here?
I have an off-site office. In 2015, I bought a property management company, so I work out of that office predominantly.
Do you do any work at home? Can you work at home, or that's not efficient?
I rarely work at home. I go home at 4 o'clock with dreams of working for a couple more hours, and
Just
I usually start working then at 7 o'clock until I'm too tired. So it's just easier to get up and get out of the house.
Do you utilize time blocking
Yes.
for the week or the month, or how?
I could do it more efficiently. So that would be one of my things to do it. And lately I read somewhere your time block should be 15 minutes. So that you can do that one thing for 15 minutes and then move on to the next one. I'm not, I will tell you, that's a growing edge. I'm not as efficient as I need to be.
Can I take you back to the 10, 5, and 3, 10-year plan, 5-year plan, 3-year plan? You told us your 10-year plan. I don't think you told us the 5 and the 3. I like the 10-year plan. It was nice to get right there, but is there something incremental between the 3 and the 5?
and I don't have it well spelled out. If you've ever seen the new technology curve, I think that was shared at family reunion. So there's very incremental low growth, I should say, for the first 3 to 4 years. Then about year 5 and 6, your growth kind of explodes, maybe even close to year 7. So you'll do this and your growth hit year 4, year 5, year 6, and then year 7, things like that. So 3 years from now, I'd like to have at least 3 teams in place. So here's where I'm delinquent. I need to take ESO, and I haven't taken that. That's expansion systems orientation. So I need to be taking that to prepare so that, you know, within the next 1 to 2 years, I want to have at least one other team up and functional, at least the beginning stages.
Expansion team?
Correct.
Does Brevity, will that meet your needs for expansion?
There were several reasons I went to Brevity. I've kind of discontinued. I had a major component this year for farming, and I've seen no results from my farming. And I spent somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000 with no return. So Brevity brought me several components that tied in with that. So that's really why I chose it. So really now all I'm using it for is the CRM, because I'm in it, functioning with it.
What were the components that you?
Evaluation landing pages and the text for leads. And evaluations worked. In that, I probably had 6 people that signed up on the evaluation page from my mailers. And actually, better check with one of your relatives, because I was going to try and list that on his property, and then he told me that if he was listed, he'd list with you. I'll give you his name.
Sounds like I'm looking at.
His wife, I think, would have listed with me.
Does everyone know what brevity is? No. Why don't we give a little explanation?
Well, brevity is simply, it's one of Ben Kinney's companies. Ben Kinney, I think right now he's number 2 in the whole Keller Williams, and he's he was into developing tech products. And so he started this, and they're a dime a dozen. Constant Contact, E-Edge, Top Producer, all of it. It's simply a contact resource manager, CRM. It's a way to stay in contact with your database.
But it was probably geared, and I don't know, I stayed away from the brevity display at Family Reunion, but I would think that he wrote it with the Millionaire Real Estate Agent systems in mind.
Well, yeah, there's nothing, his platform is to have a lot of add-ons that all feed one another. So he's now offering an IDX valuation, so if I build my own website, embed their IDX, and it automatically feeds my CRM, and then we could program it that automatic emails, just a variety of things that could happen there.
Does Lori use brevity for settlements?
We have not utilized it to the extent we could. Tyler and I were actually talking about that. We could do it as our, well, one of the things we do is for listings, when we post to Craigslist, and now that we have Circle Picks, it doesn't work the same. But whenever we post to Facebook, Craigslist, an automatic email would go out to our clients, just so it appears as we're on an ongoing basis where we are marketing the property. So it's a good way to deal with listings. On the buyer side, we can do file management and have checklists. So we have a executed contract on 123 Main Street. Here's our checklist. Check it off as you go. And it's just a good, it also has that capability. At this point, we're relying upon, I mean, our systems can be better. I'll say it that way. Yeah.
Did you find it challenging to let go of the control of some of the functions of real estate, especially to family members? Just saying, I mean, your wife, you know, your son.
Well, the big joke now is the way our offices are, there's 2 offices. So Tyler will be talking to Matt about a file, and I'll want to add my 2 cents. And his thing is, just go back to lead gen and let us know. Which is that, I would say no, delegating has not been, that hasn't been difficult for me. And actually, after you experience it, it's like I wish I were 3 years ahead and I never had to meet with another potential client ever again. I mean, that would be absolutely fantastic. Because really the life-giving parts of this business are the dreaming of it and executing the plan to grow the business. And if I could spend all my time doing that, that would be wonderful. So some key components, I would say, for me, is today, right now, stop look, because you go to these seminars and you say, okay, Brivity.com, I got to go explore that, or Top Producer, I got to go explore that. You're always looking at the tools. Stop looking at the tools. Look at yourself. What do you have to do to go from point A to point B, if that's what you want to do? You know, I've met an awful lot of agents who, if they can just sell 30, 40 homes a year, they're just happy as happy can be. And if that's what you want to do, this Keller Williams system allows for that, and that's great. So I think begin with yourself, define where you want to go, and then focus on what you have to do. So if your problem is delegating, what am I going to do to grow in my ability to delegate and not to micromanage? So, you know, for me it is how constantly my growth is, how am I going to generate more leads? If I can generate more leads, the other stuff will work quite fine. Our systems can grow substantially. I mean, we can grow substantially with our current staff and systems. It still is generating leads. It's a big key component. So I think that's my biggest aha of the last 5 years is do an internal focus and develop it. I'm growing as a person. And I think your business, the adage is in bold, and I'll put this plug in. Bold's coming in the fall. There isn't one of you in here that shouldn't be in the bold room. There's none. There's no reason. If you're scared of bold, get over it. It's a key, because it's not just about making 20 contacts a day. It is about the challenge of your mind and growing as a person. So that component, thinking bigger, thinking beyond the limitations that you placed upon yourself or accepted for yourself. Those are some of my big takeaways. None of us are special. Nothing is. I mean, I'm not any more special than anyone else, and you know, I have the same kind of dreams. You know, I'd love to be on the stage at family reunion or mega camp. I'd love to be part of Gary's top 100 group where a couple times a year you get to go spend, 2 days with Gary Keller. I have those aspirations, and I, even at my age, think I can get there. Hoorah, yeah. So if you can't think it first, you're not going to experience it. So focus on yourself and growing and figuring out where you want to go. Don't worry so much about the tools. You'll figure that out. And whatever tool you have, work with the tool and make it work. There's not like there's a better tool out there that's going to make you go from 30 transactions a year to 60 transactions a year. That's not going to happen from the tools you use.
Cal, you mentioned in 2015 you were bold, and I was in that bowl with you, and you decided to hire a MAPS coach. So what has the MAPS coach done for you in your business? And why did you decide to get a MAPS coach?
Well, when I look at that, the 3 years previous to that, I was doing about 35 to 40 deals. So I realized my ceiling is somewhere in that area. So I did it with the belief that I could actually raise my lid. I could expand my business. I did it because they did convince me that actually going into coaching would have benefits. So I say, again, it's not a magic pill. Once upon a time, I ran marathons, and you don't get up in the morning and run a marathon, but you get up every morning and you do something. So 6 days a week I was running, and then after I was doing that for a while, I started reading about it and found out there's 3 key components. One is a long distance run, one is a speed training, and one is tempo training. So if you do those 3 things a week and then just log some miles in between, you will get to the point where you can run a marathon at a much better pace. And so coaching has been like that. It's that I'm running a marathon, and coaching helps me put in each day, remind me what my goals are, and hold me accountable to them. And Dennis asked me if this was my Bible. Well, this was one thing that cost me $12,000. All right, so that's MAPS coaching cost me $1,000 a month, and I get a knife and this. And I get my tuition paid for mega camp and family reunion. And I get much more than that. But just from, if you're going to look at it as cents and dollars, the return I get on that $12,000 is probably, I don't know, $1,000 of actual product value, maybe. Probably not quite that much. The other thing with that, that was, I have found it invaluable to go to Keller Williams events, family reunion and mega camp. They're just like one of those speed training things I went on when I was running marathons. I get up and I hate that, but boy, when I'd run 5 1-milers as hard as I could and get back to the house, there was no better feeling. There is no better feeling than that. And so to go to family reunion is like that. It's just, well, I looked at my numbers. So far this year, with 53 deals on the book, but this counts 50 of those 53. 22%, 11 deals have come from referrals. And part of that is, the vast majority would be KW referrals, agent-to-agent referrals. And I've done that by going to these events, developing relationships, getting on Facebook, on the groups, and if somebody puts in Lancaster County, I usually have a friend somewhere, an acquaintance, who says, that's Calvin Yoder. dings on my phone, and about 80% of the time I can be the first responder. So that's been how my business has benefited. Sphere, 50% has come from Sphere. If I were working FSBOs and expireds as strongly as I could, it might be less than that. So far to date, I've only had one deal that way. I mean, I've been working them. I have more long-term drips going on with people there than instant business. And Bull teaches you it's instant business. Justin signed it up his third for sale by owner last week or something like that. So that's a weakness of my business right now.
Did you?
Maybe more than that. I was at sales meeting last week to do that.
What source are you using to make the calls? Can we ask?
Vulcan 7.
Vulcan.
Through team leads.
Yeah.
That's just getting the for sale by owner information.
So we're both competing for a couple of them. The one for sale by owner emailed all the agents, so that's actually kind of fun, because these are the people that are talking to.
Art Raff, Spencer Marker, Kat, myself.
And the Ashley Bruner team. So just maybe a couple things here. So I wanted to just show you one of my deals so far this year, which was helpful for me. 50% from Sphere, 22% from referrals. I'm an ELP for Dave Ramsey, and 10% of my deals have come from leads from the Ramsey system. 8% from Zillow and 6% from Homes.com.
From your listings in those? Or paid? You paying for leads or?
I'm paying for leads on Zillow and Homes.com. Actually, the return on Homes.com has been a bit better. It's a much smaller investment. The difference between Homes and Zillow, you get the exclusive call. Homes.com, you're competing, so you have to be on it just like that. Some other, I've always found facts and figures helpful. One of the things my coaches have looked at is I should not be spending more than 10% of my gross income on advertising. So that's one of the line items I look at. And so far that has worked well for me. We build our budget this year on selling 100 homes. I originally started with a goal of 120. It'll be very difficult for us to get to 120. It's going to be a challenge to make it to 100 this year. We're still going to have to push very hard to get there.
Why is it a challenge for 100? What, did you get off track or?
Well, one of the challenges of building a business is all of a sudden your expenses are pretty substantial. So we have an S Corp, and the benefit of an S Corp is we pay salaries to ourselves. Lori and I both get a salary, and we only pay Social Security on that salary. Then the profit is above that. We build in things like we reimburse ourselves for mileage. So I get tax-free. Last year I made $12,000 extra that I actually got to write off as an expense. So it was tax-free income to myself as a mileage reimbursement. So the other thing is to develop a mindset. I'm not a real estate salesperson. I'm a business person that happens to be in the business of selling real estate. So we have this S Corp, and between our salaries are our biggest expense. Between salaries, coaching, all expenses, advertising, I will write a check at the end of this month for $20,000. Every month, I'm paying out 20 grand. And in May, I had one settlement. I mean, it's painful to know that I wrote checks out of my savings account for about $16,000. So that is one of the reasons May was awful. We're going to have 36 closed transactions for the first 6 months. So that means I have to do, we'll do the math, 64 the last half. Of those 64, we're up to 53, so we're going to we have 17 on for the second half of the year. I still have to do 8 transactions a month. So the challenge is making sure I hit 8 every month. As far as business planning, I've also done the bell-shaped curve. Figured 20% first quarter, 30% second quarter, 30% third quarter, 20% last quarter. Statistically, I haven't really done that. That's a good way. The peak of the real estate season is often during those middle 6 months. Though I found the last quarter to be a very good quarter for me, maybe stronger than the third quarter.
Settlement-wise.
Correct, yeah.
Were you up?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
How does your property management company and your investments tie into your team? Do you still buy?
I personally have not bought anything for the last 3 years. I've invested more in my businesses. Property management has brought me, it ends up bringing me about maybe 2 to 4 deals a year. Owners decide to sell, owners decide to purchase. So I bought basically 80 potential clients. Not all of them use my services, so I mean, some of my folks are loyal to somebody else. So that helps. One of the things I'm learning that is if I scale the property management business, the returns on property management are much higher than what people usually tell you in real estate. And one of my learnings is you start managing it yourself, you get to about 20 units and you're pulling your hair out and you're saying, you know what, it's a lot easier, I can make a lot more money selling. And so you stop doing it. But if you use the same models and you get to leverage, then you just keep growing. Your profitability comes in volume in property management. So the more units I can add there, the more profitable that's going to be for me.
How many units do you have yourself that you
Personally own? Yeah, I think including our house, we have 13. And
13 properties or 13 units?
units, I think. It might be 12. I should know that number right off the top of my head. But I own 2 3 units, that's 6, and then I own 5 or 6 individual units in my own house. Staying power, you talked about that. Probably one of the best decisions I made was I bought a really nice, a decent unit. It was a 2 unit that was making good money. And if any of you have been in the business long enough, F&M was in a buying, they had a company that was in a buying spree. And I decided to sell one of my 2 units to them. And I used the proceeds from that early, during my first year in the business to pay off my house mortgage. So it alleviated a lot of stress to not have a house payment. So the other thing is manage your finances well. If you're making $30,000 a year, learn how to live off of that. And when you make $100,000 a year, the first thing you don't need to do is go buy a Mercedes-Benz to look the part. All right, I'll drive my Toyota Camry and give up the people that think I have to drive a Benz in order to earn their business to just plug away. So that's one of there's an awful lot of bells and whistles that we get caught up in, and think about your own financial future more than the appearance of success. Be successful before you have the appearances of success. And maybe you don't ever even have to take the appearances of success.
Millionaire next door.
Right. I'm in the top agent group, so a lot of the successful agents in Elkhart are part of that. Actually, some of them. And one of them once said that a person told him, well, I'm going to choose this other agent because I'd rather drive with her. She's got a nicer Mercedes-Benz than you do. Well, okay, so what, I mean, yeah, I'm never going to get their business because I don't.
Stink
I don't-
deal, stink early.
Yeah, anyway,
Next. Did you have hard money resources early on, or did you tap into the equity of your home, or did you have to pay it off as far as making investments?
With what works within our family structure, hard money is not one of the things that would work well for us. I was fortunate enough to, once I paid it off, I got a line of credit, and so I still have that line of credit. And then I owned half or more of our rental units, and I also have a line of credit on our rental units. So in the more recent purchases, I would borrow money from the line of credit as my down payment and then finance the balance. The other learning was be happy with slow, steady growth. In December of 2016, I paid off my second investment property. It's a 3-unit, and it now generates probably a profit of $1,500 a month for me. I just wake up and that $1,500 eventually flows into my bank account every month. So it's just one of those learnings that I didn't make a lot of money on that from day one, and I put some sweat equity into it, and then over time it pays itself off.
Were you an S corp from day one?
No, I did that, I think, in either 15 or 16 is when we got that.
Were you LLC previous to that?
No,
No,
it was just
no.
our own personal
Corporate.
finances,
Okay.
yeah. So actually now our check goes, you have to go through the state and get registered, and so now the Market Center pays out a check to Living in PA group with our settlements. So it goes right into our S Corp bank account.
What would you say, like as far as timing, since you kind of waited for the rest of us that don't have them yet, what is a deciding factor to set an S Corp up?
Well, my first caveat is double check with your accountant. What my accountant told me
Okay.
was when you are making it's probably not worth it until you're making $100,000. And that kind of becomes the point where it starts to make sense.
Okay.
So well, I'm curious, how many of you own your own investment properties? 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how many are in this group?
What did you say?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we are better than the norm in this business. All right, so 25% of us own investment properties. I think across NAR, statistics are maybe 5 or 10%. So I think the first piece of advice I would have for you is scrape together some money and buy an investment property. What do you know better than real estate? Okay, and so I think having some investment properties and just allowing them to work for you is your first, is a good way to leverage. And so that would be one of my biggest encouragements to you, is make owning investment properties part of your strategy and your goals. And this is where, so whatever you're saying in your own mind for you, whatever you're saying that's keeping you from doing that, that's one of your limiting beliefs. You might be saying, I didn't come from a family like that, I don't make enough money, I can't do that. Just start telling yourself, I'm going to own 10 investment properties by this year, and work it back. So what does that mean I have to do this year to get to that point? And maybe you buy your first one 2 years from now.
What are your thoughts on flipping? You're saying hold on to them, correct? You're saying own them.
That's my own strategy. If you're going to do flipping, well, Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote a book, One Thing. What is your one thing? How are you going to generate business? And it could simply be, I'm going to have a real estate license to flip. Then you need to have lead generations and mechanisms, leads coming in, properties you're purchasing, and you're going to have a whole system. I could see how, the systems work. Like in flipping, you would have systems in place to generate business from sales has much less risk involved for me, and so I've chosen to move from flipping to sales as my main focus. The reason I own as many rental properties as I do today is because my systems were not as strong as they needed to be, and the market was such that my flips were I was unwilling to sell my flips for a loss.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest struggle that I've heard from investors, and I think even when we were at the investor meeting, is in flips, it's the contractors. You've got to have great contractors in place to really make the dollars work. That's where it'll eat up your profit very quickly. So if you have that, then...
Correct. And it's your own, my own personal limitations. I've not been able to put lipstick on a pig. I want to have it be a place that I would want to live there for the next 10 years, or have one of my kids live in it. And when you go to that extent, it's also, then I needed to buy much cheaper than what I bought. I think I started with, if I can have a 40,000 margin, I can make it work. Well, that wasn't enough.
So is there a property you always look for, like a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, under 100,000, or, I mean, what parameter do you set for buying an investment property?
There's a couple, I haven't done a lot recently, so for me would be I'd like to have a cap rate of 8%, 7.5 to 8, which is lower than a lot of investors would do. And the cap rate, a simple way to do that is take your net income and divide it by 0.08. And that's what your purchase price should be. Or if you're gonna, your purchase price and improvements should be. So if you buy it for 60 and need to put 40 into it, so you're gonna pay 100, you're essentially gonna make 100, have 100,000 in it, then I would expect a net profit of $8,000 a year. Now, I'll take that back. 8,000, if that's paying, that's not including your mortgage payment. All right, so if your mortgage payment is $600, then I would expect 200, or a 600 times 12 is 7,200. I would only expect maybe a $30 or $40 a month cash flow. So in my buying properties, cash flow is the last, is the least important factor for me. There's 4 factors in a return on investment: is appreciation, cash flow, debt reduction, and tax write-off. And I value the cash flow kind of as the least important. I'd like to break even if possible.
From a lending perspective, if you don't mind if I just chime in, so like Lanco Federal Credit, if you contact them, they'll give you a ratio for what they allow, like as a business loan. If you take out a business loan to buy an investment property, they'll give you the ratio that they're looking for what you're charging monthly rent, to what the loan amount is, and what your profit looks like. So very helpful that way.
That's to you. That is to be using that property as the source of income.
You got it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They will loan out for that ratio to keep them risk friendly and you in a good spot.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Just an idea.
Yeah.
Someone who wants to get involved but doesn't have their own.
Now, if you're newer to the business, one of the things you should just be aware of, David's not here anymore, they may do 1 year now. They're going to be looking for 2 years of tax returns as a self-employed person. So when it comes to borrowing money, you're going to need to show a history of earning income in this business. And if you're not risk averse, hard money lending is a great way to go.
Do you have hard money lending connections? I know you said you weren't really, that wasn't really.
There's one person I refer to.
Okay.
I've also found out most of them are running out of money because so many people want to borrow. Talking about changes, I thought I want to flip, and I'd really like to work with investors because I'm an investor and understand that. Investors are tough to work with as well. There is one now that I love to work with. He's pretty loyal to me. So in return, I'm loyal to him. If I had to try and find deals for 5 or 6 people, it's tough. So having 1 or 2 loyalties is a whole lot better, and you have a reciprocation. So if I can do 4 deals a year on investment properties, from one investor, that's great. Help him buy 2 and help him sell 2. It's a wonderful way for me to do business. Somebody who wants you to show them properties, write 10 offers to get maybe 1 accepted, and then they're going to look to the next person. In my opinion, it's not the best use of my time. guys ready to go make some phone calls?
Did we
Time
tell you about the
blocking?
last part?
Yeah, the last 15 minutes we can lead you.